Jamarcus Russell is regarded as one of the greatest busts in NFL history. The former #1 overall pick had one of the greatest arms a quarterback could have and had the potential to be what Mahomes is now. It's crazy to think about it in that regard. Yet he would be out of the league after just 3 seasons. Jamarcus's life would take a turn for the worse over this past summer, as he would be accused of stealing over $74,000 from his former high school where he was a volunteer coach at the time. Listen, while we all know that Jamarcus Russell was one of the biggest busts in NFL history, is he actually the worst or biggest bust of all time? Well, for today's video, we're going to kind of take a deep dive into the career of Jamarcus Russell, from the beginnings to his time with the Raiders and eventually his ultimate downfall, to see just how bad Jamarcus Russell actually was. If this is your first time on the channel, go ahead and smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. We're on the road to 2,000 subs. We post weekly content here, but without further ado, let's go ahead and take it to the beginning of the journey that is Jamarcus Russell. What? Now, that sounded corny. Russell was born on August 9th, 1985 in Mobile, Alabama. Russell would attend Lily B. Williamson High School and would never miss a single game. By his sophomore year, Russell had grown up to be 6'3" and became a force in his 4 years in high school. During this time, Russell would throw for nearly 11,000 pass yards, which is a record in Alabama football history that stands to this day. Per Rivals.com, Russell would earn a 4-star rating and had plenty of offers from a variety of schools, ultimately choosing LSU in 2003. Russell would transcend into superstardom while in college, amassing numerous accolades, including SEC Player of the Year, First Team All-SEC, and Sugar Bowl MVP. With his stock at an all-time high, Russell would forego his final season in college and would enter the draft in 2007. During his combine, Russell would leave scouts and GMs in awe with his incredible size and arm strength. The potential was enough to overlook some obvious red flags. More on that later. The Raiders, who were in the midst of a decade and a half's worth of atrocity football, had the worst record in the NFL at 2-14 in the 2006 season. In an effort to start over, the Raiders would make a move to select Russell with the first overall pick, ahead of the likes of Calvin Johnson, Adrian Peterson, Joe Thomas, Patrick Willis, and Darrelle Revis. While new head coach Lane Kiffin was against the idea of grabbing Russell, owner Al Davis was convinced. And if you knew anything about Davis at this time, you knew there was no talking him out of anything once he made up his mind. And right from the get-go, Jamarcus held out for the best possible deal and wouldn't be with the Raiders organization until the regular season had actually already started. It goes without saying that he missed plenty of time to train with his teammates, so that includes OTA, voluntary mini camps, training camps, preseason. Russell did get time to play at certain points in the season, but did not necessarily impress, playing in 4 games that includes 1 start. Russell amassed 2 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, a putrid 55.9 passer rating, and completed less than 55% of his passes. The lone start that he had included 2 interceptions and a lost fumble. Nonetheless, Russell was the future, so barring any setbacks, he was the man in 2008. With training camp, OTAs, and all that good stuff under his belt, the world was ready to see the #1 overall pick in action. And the Raiders would lose 41-14 in his Week 1 debut. Russell and the Raiders were looking like a team clearly in a rebuild, but it had appeared that he was heading in the right direction, as the Raiders would win their final 2 games to finish 5-11, with Russell actually having 6 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions during that 2-game win streak. And guys, that was the highlight of the #1 overall pick's career, as year 3 would prove to be brutal. In the 2009 season, the Raiders had turnover at head coach, as Lane Kiffin was canned after 2 years with the Silver and Black, and Tom Cable, the new man in charge, was not the biggest fan of Jamarcus Russell, and it became obvious from the get-go. Despite drafting 2 wide receivers with their first 4 picks in the draft, there was not only no improvement out of Russell in the offense, but there was a huge regression to boot. After 2 close games to start the season, the Raiders would get blown out in their next 3 contests, with a 16-96 point differential in those 3 games combined. After a shocking win at this point against the Eagles, the Raiders would get blown out again. This time, Russell would get benched in the game. He would get the starting nod one more time, but after another terrible game against the Chiefs, Cable and the Raiders would bench Russell indefinitely. The Raiders would win 2 of their next 3 games with Jamarcus riding the bench, and the GOAT himself, Bruce Gradkowski, leading the way.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
The Raiders unfortunately would have to turn back to Russell after an injury to Gradkowski, and Russell played like he hadn't missed a beat. After playing so poorly in the little time that he was given, Russell was downgraded now to third string behind Charlie Fry. Leave a like if you remember Charlie Fry. The last positive thing that Jamarcus did, I am sure Broncos fans remember, as in the last minute of this game against Denver, Russell would actually score a last-minute touchdown to knock the Broncos off, who were in the midst of a late-season collapse, where even beating the lowly Raiders would have gotten them into the playoffs. Even though that did result in a win, it would be the last time that Jamarcus Russell would play in the NFL ever again. In 2009, Russell threw 3 touchdowns to 11 interceptions with a horrid 48 completion percentage. During the 2010 offseason, Russell arrived to minicamp incredibly overweight. The 6'6" quarterback came in at a staggering 290 pounds, while some sources say it was actually closer to 300. Combined with the fact that Oakland traded for another first-round quarterback bust in Jason Campbell, Russell could not even hold on to a roster spot and was subsequently released. Not only that, the Raiders filed a grievance to get some of their guaranteed money back from him to boot. Russell would work out for a number of teams, including the Saints and the Redskins, but would not shake off the weight, nor could he impress enough for a team to give him a chance. Russell was out of the NFL for the next 3 seasons, when in 2013, he did make a big push for any team to give him a chance. He had lost significant weight and training with the likes of Jeff Garcia and Marshall Faulk, but this comeback attempt fell flat on its face, even after offering to play for free. He would finish his career with a 7-18 record, 18 touchdowns to 23 interceptions, which included his woeful 2009 season, and after he retired, Russell was labeled one of, if not the biggest bust in NFL history. The Raiders would even unofficially retire his jersey as if it were a curse, pulling the plug from guys like Terrell Pryor from wearing it to avoid being compared to the man. So what exactly happened? I know he had a horrible tenure with the Raiders, but somebody could have given the former #1 overall pick a chance, right? Unfortunately, Russell just kept putting his foot in his mouth. Over the course of his tenure, his work ethic and off-the-field issues would continue to follow him during his career. David Deal claimed that coaches would send him home with blank tapes, and when asked if he watched any film, Russell would respond with a yes. Do you know how low your coaches have to view your work ethic to pull off a stunt like this? These are grown adults at the end of the day to do this. That's rough, buddy. When the Raiders released Russell, he was also in the midst of a codeine scandal, having been arrested for possession of it without a prescription. These were rumors that had been around Jamarcus since he was in LSU, and it was all but confirmed that he had been guilty of something to do with it. So when you combine a guy who had one of the worst seasons a quarterback could possibly have in a season, that would later show up very overweight, showing no urgency in the fact that he needs to get it together, especially after just being arrested, it makes sense why teams were not really willing to bite on Jamarcus Russell. Now, to be fair, not all the criticism goes to Jamarcus Russell, as the Raiders don't have clean hands themselves throughout this entire ordeal. To me, culture plays a big part in the development of a lot of players, and during Al Davis's last few years alive, they were some of the worst teams in the NFL during that span. On the pivot with Ryan Clark, Russell would go on to say as much. Speaking on that said prank that we were talking about a few minutes earlier, Russell questioned why coaches would do that in the first place. With that, I do agree, as they could have gone about it a different way. He would go on to say that he would throw bombs at practice, only for his receivers to drop the pass. Again, knowing who the Raiders were at this time, part of me does want to believe that. He also did acknowledge his part in the failed run in Oakland, claiming that he was dealing with personal issues that included deaths to people close in his family. You know, everyone reacts to death in a different way, so maybe there's a chance that things could have played out differently. But the facts are the facts. Jamarcus Russell was out of the NFL after 3 seasons, and for that, he deserves my first and currently only F- in my How Bad, How Good series. But now the question becomes, was he truly the worst? Honestly speaking, I still think it's Ryan Leaf, with Akili Smith making a strong push. But I do understand why some people make the argument for Russell. Leaf, hands down, had worse statistics across the board than Jamarcus Russell, whether it's win record, touchdown to interception ratio, yards per game, I think is fairly even. You know, you guys can check me on that. The only thing that people have against Ryan Leaf or against Jamarcus Russell I think has to do with the fact that Russell was a #1 overall pick and Leaf was #2. On top of that, there may be some recency bias that plays along with it. And like we said in the beginning, the latest that we had heard from Russell was that he was in the midst of controversy after being fired for stealing around $55,000 from his high school. He's set to go on trial in October of this year. So what do you guys think? You know, normally I ask you guys, what grade would you guys give his career or what happened in their career? Like, you know, what would you guys give him? I think for this one, this question is going to be a little bit different. Do you believe Jamarcus Russell is the worst or greatest quarterback bust of all time? Be sure to leave your comments down below. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys could do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe. We're on the road to 2,000 subs. Love you guys, and until next time, shaboy!